So we've got just an awesome panel organized, so we're going to dive right in. We're going to talk about how you get started with community leadership. We're going to continue building on the theme of strength-based leadership, and maybe even talk about how we build on the strengths of our region as community leaders. And then you're going to walk away with some good advice, some sort of pithy statements and frameworks that you can use in your leadership, some mantras. I know it's going to happen. So with us today, we're just so grateful. We have President Betty Young from Hocking College. She's a native of Southeast Ohio. Coming back to this post was very much a homecoming. I've had the pleasure of watching her and being inspired by her, frankly, inspired by her courage. I'd say she probably holds the title of the only person in the room that's ridden a Harley-Davidson across the country to confront Jay Leno when he took after two-year colleges. And so I hope we'll hear a little bit about that internal strengths you have as a leader. And so thank you for being with us. And also with us today, we have Mayor Tom Johnson from Somerset, Ohio. He's served as an executive in residence for the George Voinovich School. He's the founding, for those here from the Perry County Foundation, was really a founding board member for that foundation, also the founding director for the Perry County CIC. And so I kind of believe in panels. If you've got people with different perspectives, you shouldn't ask them the same question. So I'm going to kind of start this discussion with a different question for each person, and then we're hoping this will just feed into a conversation. And no doubt it will, and somebody will be running after us with a hook because there's lots to talk about. So Mayor Johnson, I would love to start with you.
Okay.
And, I'd love for you to share your story. In 2011, you were an investment banker. You were living in New York. You were working in the World Trade Centers. And then you came home. And I remember you describing it to me. It was almost like I was Amish. I didn't even have a car. And so he came home not having connected in his community for 20 years, 30 years. And there's now not an amazing thing happening in Somerset that does not have Mayor Johnson's fingerprints on it. I have never seen a leader get so involved with so many meaningful things. So here with us today, we have people just starting their journey. They've been given this fellowship. They've been said, we expect you to volunteer in the community for the next 5 years. And some of them, from the surveys we got, feel like they're kind of starting from scratch. So can you talk with us about how you started there to get to where you are now?
Sure. Let me give a little bit of background. I was an investment banker, and I worked for a British bank. And I started out in Los Angeles and got transferred to New York City and in Miami, and I worked in the World Trade Center. And then I got transferred to Singapore and London. And a year before 9/11, I had an office in the World Trade Center. A year before 9/11, I got transferred to London. And I was on a plane flying over the Middle East when 9/11 happened. And I was head of human resources for the Bank for North America. So I felt a strong sense of responsibility. Are all of our emergency plans going to hold up? And, just was kind of traumatized by it. And decided the next year that I wanted to retire and go back to the little town I grew up in. And I hadn't lived there since I went away to college. And I went from, being an executive in a bank and traveling and living in urban areas back to a small rural Appalachian town in Perry County. If any of you have been to Somerset, it's a historic town. There's 70 buildings on the National Register of Historic Places, and it's a very special place visually. Having been all around the world and lived overseas, I know how special Nelsonville is, for example, and the towns that we have in Appalachian Ohio. And at first, I was kind of, as Cara said, I went Amish and kind of went into my shell and didn't have a car. I just moved there from London, and I didn't have a car there or in New York either. And I gardened and spent time with my parents before they passed, and really got to love the community and saw things that could be done. And my parents were alive at the time too, and they shared their thoughts. And my community hadn't gotten a grant in probably a decade and thought they weren't eligible. And so I went to the mayor and I said, Well, I don't know how to write grants, but I know how to do investment banking, complicated projects that you got to get the money and you got to do over time. Let me see if I can help. And my first grant was a little sidewalk project for $40,000, and I really got hooked after that. And I started volunteering in the Historical Society, took on a leadership role there, and then the mayor recruited me to replace him. And so I stepped into that role. But I didn't really ever growing up think that I would become a politician. I didn't think I had the courage to, put myself out there like that. And but I did. So
Here we are. That's a perfect segue. So I've already put the teaser out there, Dr. Young, about this trip across the country to talk with Jay Leno. And really, you've overcome a lot of adversity, and you've used those vulnerabilities as strength. So, if you could talk a little bit about your journey, kind of the steps in that process, and even the inside journey you've taken as a leader.
Sure. So good morning, everybody. Afternoon now. I grew up in a holler about 60 miles from here, over in Washington County. My dad wanted boys. He got me. 500-acre farm. We had no less than 200 head of sheep, and then when the lambs were born, you could more than double that. I know where Barnesville is, because that's where we took I met a Barnesville person here. That's where we took the lambs to sell them. So it was a very modest growing up. Nobody talked to me about college. When I was 19 years old, I got married, which back in the early 70s was pretty common. And when I was 20, my daughter was born. And by 23, I was divorced. My big white picket fence fell down. Don't mean Dallas, right? Big D, don't mean Dallas. And so I had to figure out how I was going to put a life together for my daughter and for myself. I had always worked. I followed a man to Columbus that became my husband, and I worked for Jumpin' Joe Ferguson out of Perry County, who was the state auditor at the time. And through that, I grew up because I wasn't grown up yet, and I grew up. And, it's at 10 years out, I decided I needed to have a piece of paper in my hand that told the world I could do something. And that's when I went back to college, and I earned the confidence, really, to do college work, and I earned an associate degree in math and science. After that, I finished at Ohio University with a bachelor's, master's, PhD, and then went to Capital University for a law degree and a postdoctorate in business law. While I was at Capital University, I had the opportunity to start working in online education through Franklin University over 20 years ago. Nobody was doing online education. It was brand new. I didn't know what I was doing, but I figured it out. 4 years later, I had the opportunity to begin to apply for the presidency. And after having been in many community colleges across the country through the program I was doing with Franklin, I decided that's what I really wanted to do. And the reason was very simple. If it hadn't have been for Washington State, now Washington State was Washington Technical College in Marietta at the time. If it had not been for Governor Rhodes, who had a vision for a community college or a two-year college to be 50 miles from everybody, I wouldn't sit before you today. I'd still be doing many of the jobs. I had great jobs, but I'd still be doing those. I wouldn't be doing this. But because of his vision, I wanted to be able to provide for more people what had been provided for me. And that has kept me in education and kept me from practicing law. And so, but I use that legal education, I'll tell you, every day. So, in 2005, I had become a president. 2004, Jay Leno said some kind of nasty things about community colleges. We've been framed by a lot of people as secondary, a second choice, not a first choice institution, like not quite as good as the university. I'd challenge that on any day when you look at the quality of the faculty that we have, and you look at the quality of the program, and you look at the lives that our graduates have when they graduate. I never have enough graduates for all the jobs that exist. And so when Jay Leno said it, I got a little angry about it, and it was a late night show, and I went in the office the next morning early, and I'm typing a letter to him. I'm on my computer. And my brand new public relations guy comes down the hall, and he comes in and he says, "Madam President, I never see you here quite this early working so hard. What's happening?" He was a little worried, right? Public relations guy. And I said, well, Jay Leno said some nasty things about community colleges last night, and I'm not taking it. I'm sending him a letter. And he says, well, why do you think he's going to listen to you? I said, well, because you're going to take my picture on my Harley Davidson in full regalia, and we're going to put that in the letter. And he looked at me and he goes, you own a Harley? My president rides a Harley? Yep, didn't tell you about that when you interviewed. But you know, it was a tool, and that's all it became then. That passion that I had had for riding my motorcycle and enjoying that kind of life became a tool that I could use to tell a story. And I learned how to do storytelling early on in my work as a salesperson in my career. I didn't start out with ever thinking I'd be a college president. You'd be a mayor, right? We start out just being who we are and growing up in our communities and learning from people around us. And then what we do is we embrace every opportunity that come along. You know, Tom went off to be a model, he didn't tell you this, in LA. Now that was a kid's vision, a kid's dream, right? And for me, I left home and went up to Columbus, Ohio to follow a guy. That was my dream. But from all of those things that happened, opportunities presented themselves, opportunities that opened doors, that made it possible for me to do more. So when the person called me and said, I heard you're going to take this motorcycle trip to see Jay Leno to tell him, you know, community colleges are great. Are you nuts? You've only been a president for a year. Aren't you worried that this might like tank your career? And I said to the person, I'll never forget this conversation. If it tanks my career, then this career doesn't mean very much. Because I have the opportunity for one person to go to community college that otherwise wouldn't have because somebody said it wasn't good enough, then I'm missing an opportunity here. So I'm going to do it. And I've never looked back about anything that I've done like that. You know, sometimes it don't work out so well, but most of the time it does. Because if your heart is right and you're doing it for the right reasons, it wasn't for publicity for Betty Young. Some people thought that. It was for the mission. It was for the work that thousands of people across the country were doing in community colleges and weren't getting the credit for. And Jay Leno backed off. Matter of fact, a year later, he said to somebody on the late night thing, he said, now don't send me a letter about this. So I know I got to him, and I know that we made a difference.
Thank you. I mean, I love what you said, how we tell our story. I think as leaders, how we tell our stories, how we tell the story of the future of our community, that's wonderful, amazing. And thank you, Betty. I want to kind of turn back to both of you now and start to have a discussion. I do want to reserve some time at the end to talk about women in leadership, but the theme today is how do we lead from our strengths? As individuals, how do we find our strengths and lead from those? And then how do we help our region capitalize on its strengths? So I know in banking, you use as an HR tool, the very strengths finder that everyone here has taken. They've gotten a report out of their strengths, and we'll be working with Dr. Mahoney later today on that. And I know you've used it as well, Dr. Young. So maybe talk a little bit about how you've used it, and maybe because they're educators and they're in classrooms, are there specific strengths you see they bring to the community that are needed right now?
At the bank, I was in human resources, and we were doing an annual talent management kind of training program where people identified their skills gaps. And I did quite a bit of that work with high potential youth in the bank. And then all of a sudden, the banking embraced strength finders and the Gallup method. And they hired Gallup, and they put the entire worldwide 50,000 people through Strength Finder. And what they did was they looked at high-performing people in different jobs within the bank, and what were the Strength Finder profiles that led to success in those jobs. So, for example, a marketing person would have a very different profile than someone in the audit department. And then they started using the Strength Finders to as a recruitment tool as well. And we used it as a management tool when we do top management team retreats, when we do team building. We'd share our strength finders with each other. And I think for me, one of the things that I learned is that, as Jim Mahoney said, that our personal strengths are one in, so many hundreds of thousands, and none of us are normal. We're all the special makeup that we have. And if you understand that and know what your strengths are, but then also know where other strengths are, it helps build empathy for the people you work with, respect for other people's skills, it really was a major thing at the bank.
Can you bring that to the community? You brought some strengths to Somerset and really Appalachian Ohio. What do you see that you brought and that is frequently needed? Or maybe you're saying they're all needed, but maybe some specific examples of how.
One of my top strengths is strategic, and another one is futuristic. So I spend a lot of time just dreaming what if. And I was selected to represent the Appalachian region by Governor Kasich in the Capitol Bill Committee, and he wanted to have $30 million worth of wonderful arts and culture projects across the state. And in Appalachian, Ohio, we didn't know that you could do that there was money out there for those kinds of projects. So I had to work really hard, and I called up Stuart's Opera House, the leader here, and I said, do you need any money? And they actually said, we just got fully funded in our fundraiser, so we're okay. And I said, well, what if you had $500,000? What would you do? And the kind of light bulb went off, and they didn't know they could get $500,000, They were happy with the proceeds from the fundraiser. But since then, it caught fire in Nelsonville, and not me, but the people in Nelsonville, the community, and Stuart's Opera House. I don't even know how much they've raised, probably $5-10 million, so.
I can't think of the number of times that Tom's called me and said, what if? What do you think about this? So you're totally there, and you've brought that out. Now, you two also work together as president and board chair, right? It's just dawning on me. And so you probably fed off of each other's strengths. So I don't know, Dr. Young, President Young, if there's anything you'd like to add.
Well, that
to
can
this
be very
conversation.
dangerous, right?
Oh.
We all have a saying that know Tom very well. We all work for Tom because he's always out there finding the next greatest thing for us to be a part of. And that was the joy of having Tom as my board chair. He would come with, the what ifs. And I'm a visionary. I am future oriented. I don't look a lot in the rearview mirror. And I'm also very business minded. Now, I'm going to tell you, in higher education, that's not always welcomed because, it's a social mission that we have. Mm-hmm. But I always say we have to pair that with business precision to make sure that we're financially stable and that we're here for the long run. When I joined Hocking in 2014, Hocking College was in a really tough place financially with more than a 50% decline in enrollment and a $4.4 million deficit 4 months into the budget year, and no new programs for over 7 years, and lots of things that were not okay.
Maybe I can pick that story up.
Sure.
So Betty wasn't there yet. I was chair of the selection committee. Our previous president resigned and kind of melted down, and we were left with a $4 million budget deficit. We hired a search firm to do a national search, and Betty's resume landed in my inbox. And I looked at it, I Googled her, and I thought, oh, no, I passed on that. But I went back to the recruiter and I said, gosh, why did you give me that resume? And she says, well, you guys really need a strong leader right now. To turn around a $4 million deficit in higher education is going to be a lot of, blood on the walls and a lot of internal pain, and you're going to need someone like that. And we brought Betty in, and Betty's not only turned the budget around, but one of the things that she did, and I think it's important for all of us, is, that are interested in education, to think about, and that is, with the fast pace of technology and just the globalization of the knowledge that exists at all of our fingertips. When I was a kid, you'd ask the librarian or your mother or your aunt a question, and and you tried to find it in a book, but that was it. But now there's so many more tools out there. So educators need to be able to deliver access to education in a way that sometimes that gets old and out of date. So Betty made the hard choices, and she's taken the hits for doing that. And I think one thing that happens in this part of our lives is those hits don't hurt quite so bad, because you realize it's not about you personally. It's about the work you're doing, and the work is just critical. So that gives you the courage to make hard decisions, whether it's a politician or a college president.
You probably want to jump in there and just say what that feels like, and if you think it's any different for women.
I do,
Making
and
tough
I'm glad to
decisions.
talk about that. So throughout my entire life, I've been a woman. And so
Ain't
when
I a
somebody
woman?
asks me, how is it different for a woman? I don't know. I can just tell you how it is for me. What I can tell you is, as I've watched and worked with men who have been in leadership roles, and me as a woman in a leadership role, that the interaction with other people, with you as a leader, as a woman, is different. And oftentimes, when you are attacked as a leader, as a woman, it's very personal, where I have not seen that so generally with men. In other words, men, you seldom hear about, well, we don't like their leadership style. Well, what does that even mean, right? But with women, it's a very common theme to have a woman, somebody say, well, we don't like her leadership style. What's that mean? She's too man-like. I've been accused of that I don't have enough empathy or something like that. But, empathy is not my strength, and I'm the first to admit that, okay? Which is why I staff for that, okay? Because I can't be good at everything. But I'm really, really good at what I'm really good at. And that is problem solving. I'm really good at doing the business analysis of what's right and working and not working. I'm very creative, so I look outside of just the normal way of doing things to find different ways to do things. That's part of the fun of working with Tom, because he does the same thing. I'm very curious about things, so I'm always questioning, which again, as an attorney, then I get accused of interrogating when I ask questions so often about things, right? And I think that's, again, goes back to what's the expectation of what a woman will do versus what some man might do. And while I'd like to say it doesn't make a difference and you will all be treated the same, I'm at the fourth quarter of my career. And I can no longer cover that up or push it aside and act like it doesn't exist. It exists. I've dealt with it my whole life, and you'll deal with it. You'll find ways to put it on the table sometimes. I've walked into a room and said, well, this is interesting. I'm the only skirt here. And the guys all laugh, but it kind of tones down what I know is going to happen in that room. They're going to make me more acceptable to the group that's sitting at the table. Ladies in the room, sometimes still, you're going to be the only skirt in the room. Don't let that be an intimidation to you. You have a voice, and you bring a voice that is different from some of the other people that will be in the room. You're also coming from Appalachia. So every single one of you in this room, I want to tell you that you bring an Appalachian voice to the table that is different. And I'm not just talking about the accent. It's your experiences that you have had as a person from Appalachia that will inform opportunities that will be presented to you. Tom is able to write effective grants for Appalachia, even though he's been away, and I was away for many years. I worked in Texas and North Carolina, but when we come back to the region, we're still from here, and those roots are deep. And the voice that we bring from those roots is deep. And so you'll have the opportunity to tell the Appalachian story, which is different, and to gain support and influence people when it comes to what we bring to the table from southeastern Ohio and from this region.
Thank you. So you said something, I'm curious, and I think too often we overlook curiosity. I believe it's a superpower. We think we have to have the answers, but actually the most curious person in the room is often someone that's really leading in an effective way. So I'm curious about something you said earlier, Tom, about public speaking. And that, because I think it's easy to imagine this is where you start, and this is not where you start on a leadership journey. think you've mentioned in the past you had trouble with public speaking. Now you have no trouble with public speaking. Can you talk about that? You know, how did you overcome it, or did society change, or you know, I think people would like to hear.
I'm not sure exactly why it changed, but I can just say that in my banking career, I was petrified of public speaking. I was head of human resources for North America, and we were in the World Trade Center, and they planned an event at Windows on the World for all the staff, and I was supposed to speak. And I actually had to, I don't remember the details, but I had some emergency, you know, I wasn't in New York then, you know, it just petrified me to death. And I've been on the stage when I've just clammed up and you know, melted to the floor, you know. But now I think it's like Betty says, when you reach a point in your career, in your life where you have some reflection on your journey and some appreciation for developing the voice that you want to have and the ability to share that. It makes a difference then to actually do it. Betty said that she's the only skirt in the conference room. I can say I was in banking for 20 years, and I can't count the number of times I would be in a boardroom, and I was the only man without a wedding ring on in the boardroom, you know? So as a gay man, I think, you know, I've experienced some of the issues that women do, and I do really want to be honest and share that was probably the core of my fear of speaking and, you know, being out there back then. And thankfully, the world's changing. We're more diverse, and you know, it's a great place to be now.
I'd say about public speaking is I never feared public speaking. When I was in 4-H as a kid, some 4-Hers in the room, my grandmother was a beautiful seamstress, and she died when I was 9 years old, but not before she taught me some real basics about sewing. And I still, to this day, I'm 6 classes away from a degree in fashion design. And and it's, you know, I learned to make a fringed tablecloth, and I went all the way to the state fair competition in public speaking for 4-H, making my fringed tablecloth. I didn't hesitate at all speaking in front of people because I knew everything there was to know about making a fringed tablecloth. And I think that's the key. When you try to speak about things you know nothing about, it makes you very nervous. When you're asked to get on the stage to do something that's you're not passionate about, it's hard to do that. But when you're asked to speak about what you really care about, what you know inside and out, it should flow from you naturally, right? And I think that's where I am, especially as you get older. You have a lot more experiences, right? But even as I was younger, I wasn't afraid to talk about the things I cared about. Sometimes I was a little too passionate, maybe, and you have to check that at the door sometimes. But just check it to be sure that you're speaking for the right reasons. Not speaking for your own self-indulgence or to hear yourself speak, which we've all heard those speakers before, but really because you have something that you want to give to others, that you have something that you want to share that you think might be valuable to somebody else. And if you're speaking that way, I would say, you know, it should flow easy. It should feel good.
I'm going to take a liberty to share a story because my dad said, one day you will share this story. And in that moment, I did not believe him that I would share the story. But early on in my career, I was working with U.S. Senator Voinovich. And when troops would return home, it was my job to go and present a proclamation, a commendation, and to thank them for their service. And there would be celebrations of, like, literally thousands of people. And I remember reading my proclamation, congressmen behind us, you know, a lot of pomp and circumstance, and I could not say the word battalion. I could not say it to save my life, and it came out balloon. And everybody laughed, and I thought, it does not get any worse than this, until Monday when my boss said, we're going to have a session on military language for the entire staff, and it wasn't there. But you know what, you live on, and I can call my dad now and say, guess what, I did tell people that story. But it takes a while, and I think someone said earlier, it's not really a failure if you don't learn from it, right? I think Director Murnick said that. So, I want to land this with some really kind of practical advice or some rules for leadership or things you've learned that have been some of those sayings you've collected. And, sometimes they come out of our failures, even if or anything you could pass on as practical wisdom or frameworks or something you collected from a mentor, or, this time you couldn't read a word in front of 1,000 people.
I would like to share that my journey as a mayor, when you're in a public role, people are going to challenge you, and there's going to be controversy. And I think you as educators, as teachers, that's the same thing in your role, So think about your community and how you can expand your contribution in terms of volunteerism in other areas. A lot of times conflict exists in local communities, but just be brave and go in and make a contribution, because that conflict's not going to be about you personally. It's just the nature of the community and how it is. And being a teacher is an amazing, school in how to deal with that. So
I'm a Teddy Roosevelt fan, okay? And I've used this in speeches that I've made many times. And it comes from his Citizenship in a Republic speech, which is usually called by most people in the arena speech, but it's not really the name of the speech. But in this speech, it says, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong man stumbles or where doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcomings, but who actually strives to do the deeds. Be in the arena would be my advice to you. Don't be afraid. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? One of my greatest mentors said to me at the end of something that had happened that I wasn't very happy about, he says to me, "Did anybody die?" This was a Vietnam veteran. He'd served many tours. And I said, "No, nobody died." Well, I'm sorry to say that I've had to deliver messages to parents that I've lost, their child has died when they've been at an institution I've been at. It's perspective, right? So most of the things outside of statute of limitations and death, we can get over, okay? That's the lawyer side, statute of limitations.
That's a good one.
The other thing I would say about this is this speech is not about individualism. A lot of people think it is, the man in the arena, right? But his speech, if you read the whole thing, it was delivered a year after he left the presidency in Paris. It was about the collective responsibility of people, not the individualism. And it was about not advocating for individualism, but for the common sense of acting together, that we can really accomplish so much more. So read the whole speech, it's worth it.
I love it. I know, Tom, I've heard you talk about the world is run by the people who show up. And
Yeah.
you said that in context of this gathering. Do you mind to elaborate?
Yeah, Joy Pageant was previously on the board here, and when I first became mayor, I didn't have experience in local government, and she had a lot and was a great mentor to me. And so many times we'd be going around the region and we'd be at meetings and we'd be talking about things that needed to happen in the region and resources we needed to find. And Joy had a saying that the world is run by those that show up. And so come to those community meetings, volunteer, and that's where change is made in the world. So.
Mm-hmm. She taught me many lessons as our board chair. She'd say, "Cara, you get in the room and you get at that table," because I had this bad habit of standing in the back and taking the notes. And she'd say, "If you aren't at that table, you're on the menu, get in there." But I think that is a really good message for you all, just to kind of dive in and begin to be part of something. So, Tom, can you talk a little bit more about that? We kind of started here, but for someone just starting and saying, "Okay, I'm a fellow and now I'm expected to go out and be a community leader," how would you approach that?
Well, I hope each of you look for what are the volunteer opportunities within your community. get a feel for the scale and the scope of what different organizations are doing. There's amazing work that happens in all of our Appalachian counties at the community level. And show up and have a voice. Don't be afraid to speak to power. And don't take it personally either. The other thing, too, I think is really try to develop that love of community and look around you. The community is the people that live there, that work there, that are part of it. And take the Strength Finders approach and look for what are the strengths in all those people. Some of them that may be so different from you and maybe so challenging, but look for the strengths in all of them, because the more you value the community and respect and love the people in it, the more opportunities to serve, will become apparent to you.
I loved hearing you talk about it, because you see how the community needs educators and what many here offer.
If I were sitting there today at your age, first of all, I hope that you feel the honor that you should for being selected for this program, because it says that this community has determined that you are worth an investment, a significant investment, and not just in the money, but the time and the resources of people who will come out here to help you along the way. I'm going to give you my phone number before I leave. It's my cell number, and you always can text me and start a conversation if I can ever help you. I want to say that just because you're young, I think a lot of times we discount ourselves when we're young. And your students in school probably do the same thing. Well, I'm just an 8th grader. What can I do? Well, let me tell you, I've seen some 8th graders do some pretty amazing things, okay? So you can do amazing things. At 27 years old, I ran for county auditor in Washington County. I didn't get elected. Did it stop me from continuing to do things? Heck no. It was just one more thing that didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. Now let's go on to the next thing. And, if I hadn't ever had that courage the first time to apply for a more senior position in my work, I would have never had the opportunity to get where I am. You have power. If somebody says, and you will run up against some older people in your community who will be looking at you like, well, what do they think they know? They're only X age. You have to tell them, look, I know I'm younger than you. Be willing to just put it out there. But there's some new ways to do things, and I want to bring that to the table and help you. As long as you always approach it with this idea that we're helping the others to get to where we want to go, it won't matter that you're younger. It won't matter that you're a woman. It won't matter whatever you're coming with. It will say to the community, I'm here because I want to be a part of something and do something good. I'm not here to take over. I'm not here to whatever. I think there's real opportunity for you as young people. I think my generation is really looking for leadership. I know at Hocking College, I promoted 10 people this year. And it was all in an effort to grow our own, to grow people into what I see as the next 20, 25 years of running Hocking College and making it continue to be as successful and as important and meaningful to our community. It only happens with the development of the next generation. And I'm absolutely focused on that right now. That is my primary purpose over the next several years, is to be sure that we have the leadership internal. Your communities need that, and the leaders in your community, go to them and tell them that I want to be that next generation to provide leadership, and I need you to help me be at the table to be able to do that. Ask.
Let me speak to youth just for a moment as well. We're in a whole new age now where we've got smartphones, we've got artificial intelligence, and in Somerset, we have the Somerset Builders Club, which is makerspace, co-working space, and every Monday we do artificial intelligence meetup. And we've got a great group of 20-somethings, 30-somethings, 60-somethings, and others that are trying to figure out just what is this that's coming at us. And I guarantee you that for me as a leader, without your age group being present and helping us, we're not going to be successful. You're bringing something to the table that didn't exist when I was your age. So it's a tremendous asset for all of us. And it's critical that you're engaged and have a voice.
So I'll give you just a minute for any concluding comments. You may have just made them, but I will just interject, having started in this role fairly young and now firmly being in the other camp, that your youth really is your superpower. People are going to be so excited to work with you, and the nonprofits that we work with, the community organizations, they're calling out, like I said earlier, who's coming next. And so, I think that vulnerability, what you might perceive as a vulnerability, might be one of your greatest strengths. So we're so excited about this. I can close it out, or do you have anything?
I'd just like to say that I've been involved in some pretty big Appalachian Regional Commission projects across the region. And one of them, they took us down to Southwest Virginia and introduced us to the Crooked Road down there. And that's how to revitalize stone cold, dead coal towns down there. And the recipe for success was to have great downtowns, have local food, craft beverages, internet, arts and culture, and outdoor recreation. But once that mix the table was set, the success was whether or not they were able to attract 21 to 35-year-old college-educated people. A community can't survive without that. So you're not only, being a little bit of help, you're the future for these regions, and that's what's going to make us vibrant and really go forward. So I'm a big fan of this program, and I know the governor is too, and just want to thank Cara for making it happen. And I'm so proud to see what I've seen today with all of you.
Ditto what Tom says, and I would encourage you to go places. Tom invited me to go down to Southwest Virginia, and we learned a lot from those folks, okay? Every time I go somewhere, I'm looking through those eyes that are, what can I bring back? What can I learn from here? And not just, a free time or a vacation, but really, what can I take from this and bring back to my community?
Yeah, you have to carry a basket to bring something back. We often talk about that because there's lots of Longaberger baskets in this region, but it's a mindset, right? And you all have it. That's why you were selected. So, get in the room, be at the table, use your voice, leverage your strengths, look at the strengths in your community and the leaders around you, and leverage those strengths and go forth.